Hello everyone, and welcome to Fresh Master Channel. Today, we are going to have some story from Reddit. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment down below. These simple clips mean a lot to the future of this channel.
Jason Chandler sat on the couch, staring at his phone. A troubling call from his wife, Karen, had just come in. Earlier that day, his private investigator informed him that Karen and her lover had boarded a flight to Honolulu. She had told him something entirely different, but he knew the truth now. This was just the latest betrayal in a series of lies and poor decisions on her part. Jason couldn't help but reflect on his own foolishness. He dedicated nearly 10 years of his life to building a future with Karen, but now it all felt pointless. Taking a sip of his coffee, he closed his eyes, trying to block out the memories of the last decade. He first met Karen in college, 13 years ago. They were both business majors and became part of the same study group, which eventually led to them dating. They fell in love and married after graduation. Jason worked for his father, who owned a successful chain of tire stores. He spent summers working at various locations, doing everything from replacing tires to delivering parts. His father encouraged him to join the corporate headquarters, where Jason worked his way up in the accounting department and eventually became the head of it, working closely with the retiring CFO, Mike Allen. Jason knew his father hoped to hand the business over to him when he retired, and he was set to take Mike's position when the time came. Karen, on the other hand, had become a successful realtor. She worked hard, made good money, and seemed content with her career. Together, they had a comfortable life. They managed to save enough to buy a nice house, each had a new car, and from the outside, their marriage appeared stable. They never had children, something Jason had initially struggled with, but over time, he accepted it as a fact of life. However, things started to change a year ago. Karen began spending more time with the girls. What started as a weekly happy hour soon turned into multiple nights out a week, often lasting until midnight or later. Jason wasn't thrilled about it, but understood that her job was stressful. Yet, his concern grew when she began dismissing his questions about her late nights. One evening, after she came home smelling like smoke, he confronted her. "Why were you out so late?" he asked. "We just had some drinks and maybe danced a little," she replied sharply. "It's none of your business, Jason. I'm an adult and don't need you telling me what to do." Jason was taken aback. She had never spoken to him like that. Seeing his shock, Karen softened. "Sorry," she apologized. "I didn't mean it that way. It's just that the market's been tough." But things didn't improve. Their physical relationship began to dwindle. They went from being intimate multiple times a week to hardly ever. Karen seemed less interested in his life and more focused on her own. Then, one day, Jason caught her in a lie. He visited her office to surprise her with lunch, only to find out she wasn't there. Later that evening, she told him she had spent the day catching up on paperwork. That was when he realized how deep the deception ran. He considered confronting her, but he was too tired to deal with her reaction. Instead, he wondered how many more lies she had told him over the years. Later that night, Jason lay beside Karen, troubled by the growing distance between them. He hadn't felt loved or connected in months. He tried to talk to her about it, but despite her reassurances, he could sense her disinterest. Though they made love that night, Jason's doubts remained. The next month, things briefly improved, but the same troubling patterns soon returned. Jason was left feeling uneasy and unsure of what was really happening. The turning point came when his old friend Ron called, asking to meet up. Jason agreed and joined Ron at a bar, where his friend told him something shocking. Ron had seen Karen earlier in the day, not doing her usual real estate work, but holding hands and kissing a man. Jason didn't believe it, but when Ron showed him a picture, it was undeniable. The man in the photo was all over Karen. Jason was stunned and asked Ron to send him the picture. Ron offered to connect him with a private investigator, and Jason agreed. At home, Karen was unexpectedly there early, and when Jason mentioned his conversation with Ron, she seemed uncomfortable. Still, she insisted she would never do anything like that to him. The next day, Karen mentioned an upcoming company convention in Las Vegas where she would likely receive another award. She suggested they celebrate their anniversary when she returned. Jason, still uncertain, proposed joining her in Vegas to reconnect, but she declined, citing her busy schedule. Despite her assurances, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next day, Jason reached out to Ron and got the contact information for a private investigator. He immediately arranged to meet with the investigator that morning and headed over to his office before lunch. The office was cluttered, and the investigator, Jerry, greeted him with a handshake. "Good morning, Mr. Chandler. Ron mentioned you might be calling," Jerry said, gesturing to an empty chair. "Please, call me Jerry. What can I do for you?" Jason took a seat and explained the situation: Karen's strange behavior, her upcoming trip to Las Vegas, and his growing suspicions. Jerry listened carefully, nodding occasionally. "Vegas, huh?" Jerry asked, his tone thoughtful. "Do you think she's planning to hook up with someone at the convention?" Jason hesitated. "I don't know. It's possible." Jerry leaned back in his chair, clearly considering his options. "Well, I have some contacts out there who owe me a favor or two. I can have people keep an eye on her, and if you want, we can sneak in a camera and a microphone. Get the full scoop, but that'll cost extra." Jason had expected this and was willing to pay for the truth. "I figured that," he said, "but I need to know what's really going on." Jerry pulled out a small digital audio recorder and handed it to Jason. "Here, take this. It's voice-activated. All you have to do is slip it under her car seat before she leaves, turn it on, and you can pick it up later. I assume she's leaving her car at the airport?" "She usually does," Jason confirmed. "Great," Jerry said, looking at him. "Don't worry, we've got it covered. If she's cheating, we'll find out. Here's my private number. If you hear anything, give me a call anytime." Jason took the recorder and wrote a check from his personal account. He and Karen had separate accounts for personal spending and a joint account for bills. They had made this arrangement years ago, both agreeing to deposit no more than 10% of their income into their personal accounts. Jason had used his for clothes, small purchases, and gifts for Karen. He had been saving for a cruise, but knew this money would now serve a different purpose. That evening, Karen finished packing for her trip. Jason offered to help her carry her bags to the car, and she accepted, thanking him with a kiss. He noticed that she packed a lot more than what was necessary for a weekend trip. As he loaded her bags into the trunk, he couldn't resist opening one of the cases. Inside, he found her birth control pills, and his stomach sank. There were only 10 pills left in the container. She had always told him she had her tubes tied. So why the birth control? Was that another lie? Jason looked through the rest of her packed clothes. Some of it seemed appropriate for a business trip, but a lot of it was inappropriate for a conference. Tiny dresses, frilly lingerie, and 2 skimpy bikinis. One of the bikinis stood out, a barely there, sling-style bikini he had only seen online, designed to expose her body in a very revealing way. What kind of meeting was she attending? He wondered. Jason snapped pictures with his phone, feeling both anger and disbelief. He then slipped the audio recorder under her car seat, making sure it was activated before locking the car. That night, they made love, and Jason couldn't shake the feeling that it might be the last time they would share such an intimate moment. The next morning, over breakfast, Karen gave him her room number and promised she would call every night. As she kissed him goodbye, she said, "I love you." "I love you too," Jason replied, his mind racing with doubt as he watched her drive away. After she left, he called Jerry and provided Karen's room number. "Great," Jerry said. "We'll get our guys on it right away." Later that afternoon, Jason received a call from Karen, letting him know she was at the airport and about to board her flight. "I'll call you when I get checked into my room," she told him. "I'd appreciate that," Jason said, trying to mask the bitterness in his voice. "Remember, I love you." "I love you too, baby." "I'll miss you," she said, her voice sweet, but Jason's mind twisted with sarcasm. "Sure you will, you lying witch." "I miss you too," he replied, hanging up the phone. Just as he set the phone down, his father entered the office. "Everything okay, son?" his father asked, looking concerned. "You look like someone kicked your dog." Jason sighed and looked at his father. He knew better than to hide anything from him, so he opened up about the whole situation. He explained Karen's suspicious behavior, the Vegas trip, and his growing fears. His father listened quietly, then said, "That doesn't sound good. Never would have suspected her of cheating." "Me neither, Dad," Jason replied, feeling the weight of the conversation. "Well, if you need anything, your mom and I are here for you," his father said. "You know we've got your back." "Thanks, Dad," Jason said, appreciating the support. He left work early that day, feeling a mix of anger and anxiety. He drove to the airport to check Karen's car and retrieve the recorder. He found her car in short-term parking, neatly arranged just as she always kept it. He pulled the recorder from under the seat and drove home. Once home, Karen called him again. "Hi, baby," she said, her voice upbeat. Just wanted to let you know I got here okay. Thanks for letting me know, Jason said, keeping his tone calm. I'm just getting settled in, Karen added. I'll call you later tonight. Love you. Love you too, Jason replied, though his thoughts were far from loving. As soon as he got home, he plugged in the audio recorder, hoping to hear nothing. For the most part, it was just road noise and static from her radio. But then, halfway through the recording, Jason heard something that made his heart drop. The sound of his marriage unraveling, piece by piece, filled his ears. Jason sat stunned, listening to the audio recorder as Karen's phone conversation played through the car speakers. A man's voice greeted her, followed by Karen's playful response. Stud muffin, she had called him. Jason's stomach dropped as he realized she was talking to another man. The conversation grew more disturbing as she mentioned plans for next week, the week of their 10th anniversary. She confirmed to the man that she hadn't told Jason yet, but reassured him that he wouldn't suspect anything. Jason was furious. How long had this been going on? And who was this man? Shaking with anger, he grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat at his desk, replaying the conversation to make sure he hadn't misunderstood. He hadn't. His wife had been cheating on him, and now she was planning something for next week that didn't involve him. He felt like a fool, wondering how he had missed all the signs. He needed answers. He had always respected Karen's privacy, but now everything was fair game. He knew where she kept the key to her locked desk. Walking into their bedroom, he found it in a small drawer in her jewelry box, just where he remembered. With a feeling of betrayal, he took the key and entered the office, opening her desk. What he found inside shocked him. Over the years, Karen had been secretly hiding money, more than the agreed-upon 10% of her income. Her private account held over $250,000, a sum he had no idea about. Flipping through her financial records, he discovered extravagant purchases, an expensive Rolex watch, high-end clothing, and lingerie that he had never seen. All of it, no doubt, for her lover. But there was worse. Among her medical records, Jason found bills for 2 pregnancy terminations, paid in cash. He couldn't help but wonder if one or both of the pregnancies had been his. Additionally, there were receipts for regular birth control pill purchases, and a recent one for Plan B morning after pills. The date on the receipt showed Karen had bought them just earlier that week. As Jason continued to dig, he found a receipt for a down payment on a condo in a wealthy part of town. Was this for her affair, or was it part of her plan to leave him? Along with it, there were receipts for utilities and new furniture, further evidence of her secret life. Jason eyed the key ring he had found earlier, wondering if one of those keys belonged to the condo. He moved to her computer where he knew she kept a list of passwords. Finding it taped under the keyboard, he accessed her email, expecting to find more evidence. What he uncovered was horrifying. Her inbox was full of explicit emails with someone named Greg Wilson. The emails detailed their intimate encounters and grew more suggestive over the months. Some of them went back a year, around the time Jason had noticed the changes in her behavior. One email from 6 months ago caught his eye. Greg had asked if Karen had taken care of a little problem. Karen replied that she had terminated the pregnancy, and Greg lamented that she hadn't kept it, suggesting she could have passed it off as Jason's. Karen, however, refused, explaining that she had told Jason she couldn't have children. The realization hit Jason like a ton of bricks. This affair had been going on for far longer than he ever imagined. His suspicions were confirmed, and everything that had felt off about their relationship now made sense. The lying, the secrecy, the lack of intimacy, everything. He had been living a lie, and Karen had been playing him the whole time. Jason continued to scan through Karen's emails, his anger growing with each line. One email caught his attention where Greg, her lover, suggested they have closeness in their marital bed, but Karen firmly refused. "I won't do that to Jason," she had written. Greg pushed back, calling Jason a stupid cuck, but Karen stuck to her guns. Things took a darker turn when Greg proposed that Karen buy a place of her own, using her commissions, so they could meet there without worrying about being seen. She seemed to warm to the idea, mentioning her secret savings account, something Jason had never questioned before. She then confirmed in an email that she had indeed purchased a condo, made the down payment, and was getting new furniture, all without Jason knowing. Greg responded with excitement, suggesting they christen every room of the condo. Shocked, Jason kept reading, his mind racing. In another email, Greg asked why Karen stayed with her husband, to which Karen confessed that despite everything, she still had feelings for him. However, she had bought the condo purely as a secret space to meet Greg. She even mentioned the possibility of leaving him once things were settled. Jason felt sick as he read this. His wife had been betraying him for months, and now she was planning a future with someone else. He began printing the emails and receipts, trying to piece together the lies Karen had been telling him. His phone rang, and Karen's name flashed on the screen. He answered, trying to keep his composure. She pretended to be concerned about him, telling him to rest and take something for his headache. Jason, barely holding it together, ended the call, wondering if she noticed he hadn't reciprocated her "I love you." He was furious. Determined to find out more, Jason searched the company website and quickly found Greg Wilson listed as the regional manager at Karen's real estate firm. He printed the page, adding it to his growing pile of evidence. Unable to sleep, Jason decided to check out Karen's new condo. He found the address, confirmed the details, and even located the alarm code she had written down in her papers. Putting on latex gloves to avoid leaving traces, he drove to the condo, parked in her assigned spot, and used one of the keys from her jewelry box to enter. The place was exactly as he expected, a pristine love nest with tasteful furniture. But there were no signs of him, no pictures, nothing showing any connection to their life together. As he wandered through the condo, he noticed it was fully furnished, but the refrigerator was empty and the pantry nearly bare. In the bedroom, Karen's lacy curtains hung directly over an electric heater, a fire hazard he knew she had never considered. Jason opened the dresser and found lingerie he had never seen, along with men's underwear he assumed belonged to Greg. He snapped pictures of everything, his stomach turning with each new discovery. On the nightstand, he found a card from Greg, thanking Karen for the watch and eagerly anticipating the housewarming. Jason wanted to destroy everything in sight, but he focused on getting more evidence. In the master bathroom, he found 2 toothbrushes and matching towels, one for him and one for her. Jason took more photos, documenting the disturbing reality of what had been happening behind his back. The second bedroom was sparse, containing only a desk and some utility bills addressed to Karen. He photographed those too, knowing they were another piece of the puzzle. The same long, lacy curtains covered the windows, again hanging dangerously over a heater. Jason was reeling. His wife had not only betrayed him emotionally and physically, but she had also been setting up an entire new life without him, right under his nose. The condo, the emails, the receipts, everything pointed to one thing. Karen had been planning her escape. Jason noticed several safety hazards around Karen's condo, including missing smoke detectors in the bedrooms and an outdated one in the kitchen. He also wondered if it even had a working battery. After inspecting the place, he made sure everything was exactly as it was, turned off the lights, reset the security system, and locked the door behind him. Back in his car, Jason started thinking about his options. Divorce was a certainty. Even if Karen got rid of the condo and ended things with Greg, he could never trust her again. He figured her larger salary would likely prevent alimony, and he hoped the condo would mean he wouldn't have to split the house or sell it. With no kids, custody was off the table, but he wanted to make them pay. Violence wasn't an option. He had no desire to end up in jail. He found a listing for Greg Wilson and called the number, hoping it was the right one. A woman answered, confirming it was Greg's wife, Christy. Jason nervously told her about the affair. She was shocked, but agreed to meet him at the condo the next day. They set a time, and Jason made a list of things to do. First, he'd change the locks on the doors. The next morning, Jason bought the supplies he needed, including a new key for the condo. By noon, the locks were changed. He grabbed the audio recorder and emails he had printed, then headed to the condo to meet Christy. At the condo, Jason saw Christy's car and approached her. After some brief introductions, he handed her latex gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. They entered the condo together, and Jason showed her the bedroom, pointing out Greg's clothes and a Rolex watch he had been wearing. Christy confirmed it was a gift from his management. Jason pulled out a card from Karen's nightstand, which was signed by Greg, and Christy immediately burst into tears. Jason showed her the emails and played the audio recording of the conversation he had heard between Karen and Greg. Christy, though devastated, appreciated the proof. Jason comforted her, feeling as much pain as she did. Once she had collected herself, she asked what he planned to do. "I'm divorcing her," Jason said. Christy, furious, declared she'd kick Greg out of the house as soon as she saw him. Then Christy had an idea. "Why don't we pack their stuff up and drop it off here?" she suggested. Jason smiled at the thought. "I like that idea," he said. They quickly made plans to meet again in 3 hours. Jason intended to gather Karen's things and throw them in trash bags. As they parted ways, Jason couldn't help but notice Christie's charm. She was attractive in a sweet, girl-next-door way. He couldn't understand why Greg had cheated on her. He was determined to make Karen and Greg face the consequences of their actions. They left the apartment complex after stuffing their cars with their unfaithful spouse's belongings. The 3-hour drive was uneventful, and when they arrived, they hauled the bags inside, carelessly dumping them into the nearly empty second bedroom. If anything broke, it wasn't their concern. The cheaters could deal with the mess themselves. Neither had been particularly gentle while packing. With the task done, hunger set in, and Jason suggested a place he knew well. Christie followed him to a local bar, initially skeptical, but he assured her the burgers were worth it. Inside, they ordered food and drinks, exchanging stories about their failed marriages. Their situations were surprisingly similar. Both had married young, only to realize later that they wanted different things. Christie had dreamed of having children, while her husband had no interest in starting a family. Jason, meanwhile, had spent years supporting Karen's ambitions, only to realize he was nothing more than a convenient placeholder in her life. As they talked, Jason mentioned his company was always looking for good people and offered to help Christie if she ever needed a job. Their meal was interrupted when Jason's phone buzzed. Karen, clearly drunk, called to brag about winning a top sales award. She claimed she'd been asked to stay in Vegas another week to work with the company's agents and hinted at a possible promotion. Jason knew she was lying. When he reminded her their 10th anniversary was that week, she brushed it off, promising to make it up to him later. He played along, acting supportive, but the bitterness was evident in his voice. By the time he hung up, Christie could see the frustration in his eyes. She sympathized, furious that Karen was prioritizing Greg over Jason and their marriage. Jason wasted no time. He called his private investigator, Jerry, who confirmed that Karen and Greg had spent the night together. The conference had ended earlier, and most attendees were heading home, but Karen had chosen to stay. Jerry promised to send over video evidence. Jason knew the truth would be in his inbox soon. Back at Jason's house, they settled into his office. The email had arrived, containing footage of Karen and Greg together. They watched in silence, seeing their spouses undress each other before engaging in various intimate acts. It was painful, but the worst part came afterward, the casual, cruel remarks. Greg mocked Christie's love for movies and books, while Karen laughed at Jason's obsession with numbers and reports. They ridiculed his career, dismissing it as meaningless. Then came the final betrayal. Karen had no intention of coming home. She planned to keep lying to Jason while secretly escaping to Hawaii with Greg. Christie snapped at the revelation, furious that her husband was taking another woman on a romantic getaway. Jason, though equally enraged, remained composed. He had seen enough. They both knew what had to happen next. Jason planned to see a divorce attorney first thing Monday and invited Christie to join him. She agreed, grateful for the support. Overwhelmed, she broke down in tears, and Jason pulled her into a comforting embrace. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on both of them. That night, Christie asked to stay, not for anything romantic, but simply because she didn't want to be alone. Jason welcomed her without hesitation, offering her one of his old shirts to sleep in. As they settled in for the night, neither spoke, but the silent understanding between them was enough. They had each lost a marriage, but at least they didn't have to face it alone. As she stepped out of the bathroom, draped in his oversized t-shirt, Jason nearly lost his breath. Karen had always had nice legs, but Christie's were easily the most striking he had ever seen. She slipped under the covers, a playful glint in her eyes, and teased him about his reaction. He admitted, without hesitation, that he had never seen legs quite like hers. Laughing at his honesty, she nestled in beside him, resting her arm on his chest as he pulled her close, inhaling the soft, faint scent of her hair. Lying there together, he acknowledged that this was the first time in over a decade he had shared a bed with a woman other than his wife. Christie revealed the same was true for her. Their eyes met, and for a long, unspoken moment, something deeper passed between them. Then she leaned in and kissed him, soft at first, but with a growing intensity that caught him off guard. He responded instinctively, drawn in by a passion he hadn't felt in years. But as reality hit, he forced himself to pull away. He couldn't do to Karen what she had done to him. As if reading his mind, Christie settled back against his shoulder without another word. They lay together in silence until sleep overtook them. By morning, they had shifted in their sleep, tangled in each other. Jason's arm instinctively rested around her, his hand on the curve of her bosom, his body pressed firmly against hers. As he stirred awake, Christy greeted him with a sleepy smirk, making no effort to move away. Still groggy, he pulled himself from the warmth of the bed and made his way to the bathroom. Shaking off the fog of the night before, he relieved himself. No small challenge, given his current state. When he returned, the smell of sizzling bacon filled the air. Christy had made herself at home in his kitchen, expertly preparing breakfast, as if she had done it 100 times before. He watched her for a moment, captivated by how effortlessly she moved, wearing nothing but his old t-shirt. It stirred something in him, a distant memory of when Karen used to do the same, before she decided her career was more important than moments like these. The smell was intoxicating. Jason let out a low whistle, complimenting the meal as he slid into a chair. Christy brushed off his gratitude, insisting it was no trouble. When he mentioned that it had been ages since anyone had cooked breakfast for him, she seemed surprised. He explained that Karen used to, but at some point, she decided it wasn't worth the effort. It had taken too much of her time, she said, and she needed every spare moment to focus on her clients. Christy muttered a crude remark under her breath. Jason chuckled, agreeing wholeheartedly. As he devoured his food, savoring every bite, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Jerry. Without hesitation, he answered. His investigator, working even on a Sunday, had updates. Karen and Greg had left Las Vegas early that morning, boarding a flight before dawn. They had a brief layover at LAX before continuing their journey. By now, they were well on their way to Hawaii. Jerry had all the flight details and had already arranged for someone to track their movements once they landed. Jason jotted down the information and ended the call. Looking at Christy, he gave a short nod. It was happening. The betrayal was no longer speculation. It was fact. Their spouses were on a plane, escaping to paradise, convinced their secrets were still safe. As the aircraft soared over the Pacific, Karen leaned back in her seat, gazing out at the endless blue. A strange mix of excitement and unease twisted in her stomach. Greg, already dozing beside her, looked completely at ease. She envied that. A pang of guilt crept in as she thought about Jason. He trusted her, believed her lies without question. But this, she rationalized, was something she deserved. This wasn't just a reckless affair. This was freedom. When this was over, she told herself, things would go back to normal. Jason would never know, and their marriage would continue just as it always had. Eventually, they'd retire together, growing old side by side. It wasn't the first lie she had told him. Her biggest deception had come years ago when she told Jason she couldn't have children. The truth was, she could. But she had never wanted them. Motherhood held no appeal for her, so she fabricated a story about medical complications that had led to a necessary procedure. Jason had accepted it without question, but her method of avoiding pregnancy wasn't foolproof. After struggling with complications from an IUD, she abandoned it and switched to birth control pills, carefully tracking her cycle to avoid any risks. For the most part, it worked, until it didn't. The first time she got pregnant, Jason was the father. The very idea of carrying a child, of her lie unraveling, sent her into a quiet panic. She handled it discreetly, using money from her personal account for a pregnancy termination. Their finances were separate enough that Jason never noticed. From the beginning, they had agreed to put only a small percentage of their earnings into their shared account. She had manipulated that arrangement over the years, siphoning off more than she let on. This wasn't about love or a future with Greg. It wasn't even about the thrill of the affair. This was about maintaining the life she had built for herself, free from obligations she never wanted. As she looked out at the open sky, she reassured herself. This was just another secret, one more carefully hidden truth. And as long as she played her cards right, Jason would never suspect a thing. She had gotten pregnant 6 months ago. The moment she saw the test results, she knew what had to be done. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, just another quick visit to the clinic, another withdrawal from her personal account. It was handled quietly, just like before. If everything went as planned, Jason would never have a clue. Her affairs had started later in the marriage. For 7 years, she had been faithful, never even considering straying. Then, one day, everything changed. She was showing a high-end property to a client, wealthy, charming, and undeniably attractive. What began as harmless flirting escalated into something more. It happened right there in the master bedroom of the home she was supposed to be selling. By the time they were done, the deal was sealed. He bought the house on the spot. That first encounter opened a door she hadn't realized she was willing to step through. Over the next year and a half, there were about 10 others, similar situations, different men. At first, the guilt gnawed at her, but she pushed it aside. Plenty of women in her industry did the same thing. It was an unspoken reality, a trade-off that some clients expected and some agents provided. If others could do it and walk away unscathed, why shouldn't she? Besides, none of it changed how she felt about Jason. What he didn't know wouldn't hurt him. Then Greg entered her life, and everything shifted. He was nothing like her husband. While Jason meticulously planned every aspect of his life, Greg thrived on spontaneity, making split-second choices without worrying about the consequences. Jason had always been predictable, his career path laid out from the start. He worked for his father's company, was on track to become CFO, and one day he'd take over the business. Greg, on the other hand, had no long-term plans. He lived in the moment, unconcerned with the future. Their differences extended into the bedroom. Jason made love to her, attentive, deliberate, focused on making her happy. Greg didn't bother with such pretenses. He took what he wanted, and she let him, craving the rawness he brought. At first, they met in motels or vacant houses that were on the market. But as their affair intensified, the risks became clearer. Someone could recognize them. Someone might talk. Then came the night Jason confronted her about their growing distance. That rattled her. For a short time, she cut things off with Greg, throwing herself back into her marriage, hoping to mend what had unraveled. But the excitement she had found elsewhere refused to fade, and soon she was sneaking around again. She needed a safer way to continue seeing Greg. Buying a condo in her own name solved the problem. She justified it as an investment, something separate from Jason, something entirely hers. Greg had wanted to take their affair into her marital home to sleep in the bed she shared with Jason, but she refused. Despite everything, she still felt a sense of loyalty, however misguided. Her separate tax filings worked in her favor. Jason had no reason to question her finances, no way of knowing about the hidden expenses. The arrangement benefited her in every way. At least, that's what she told herself. Now, sitting on a plane bound for Hawaii, she felt no guilt. It had taken careful planning, requesting time off from work, telling her colleagues she was going to Hawaii with Jason after the annual corporate event. Greg had covered his tracks, too, claiming to Christy that he'd be traveling for work all week. Jason predictably accepted the lie that she needed to stay in Vegas longer. If he got suspicious, a simple call would unravel it all, but she doubted he would question her. He never did. The only inconvenience was missing her 10th wedding anniversary. A minor sacrifice, really. She'd make it up to Jason when she got back, and this trip would remain her secret. As she gazed out the window, the vast blue ocean stretching endlessly below, she let her mind wander. Greg had bought her a particularly scandalous sling bikini for this trip. He wanted to watch her strip out of it on the beach to put on a private show for him. The thought sent a shiver of excitement through her. Her fingers twitched against her thigh, tempted. Maybe she'd sneak off to the lavatory later for a quick release. She pulled out her phone, checking for messages. Unsurprisingly, Jason hadn't texted. He wasn't the type to send casual messages. He preferred talking in person or on the phone. That thought made her chuckle. Then, without warning, the plane jolted violently. She gripped the armrest, assuming they had hit turbulence, but something was off. The engine sounded different, and when she looked out the window, a wave of dread washed over her. They were descending, fast. Panic spread through the cabin. A flight attendant's voice came over the intercom, instructing everyone to brace for impact. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling as terrified passengers screamed. Even Greg, usually so composed, looked stricken with fear. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone, heart pounding. This was it. Back at Jason's house, he and Christy sat at the kitchen table, finishing breakfast and discussing their next moves. He was impressed by her sharpness, how methodically she dissected every detail of their spouse's betrayal. In just a short time, he felt more connected to her than he had to Karen in years. He had just poured them both another cup of coffee when his phone rang. Karen's name flashed on the screen. Without hesitation, he put the call on speaker. The first thing he heard was chaos, muffled cries, frantic voices in the background. Then Karen's voice, desperate and shaken. "Jace?" The connection crackled, nearly drowning her out. "Karen, what's happening?" he demanded. More static, fragments of words, something about the plane, something about being sorry. Then the call cut out. Silence filled the room. Jason tried calling her back, but it went straight to voicemail. He looked up at Christy, his face pale. "Try Greg," he said. She hurried to grab her phone, hands shaking as she dialed. After a few rings, she lowered it, eyes wide. "Straight to voicemail," she whispered. Jason moved swiftly, heading into his office and booting up his computer. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he searched for information. Within moments, he found what he was looking for: an airline contact number. After navigating endless automated menus and unhelpful representatives, he finally reached someone who could confirm what he feared. There had been reports of an emergency involving the flight. Details were still unclear, but investigations were underway. Jason exhaled sharply, gripping the desk. He wasn't sure how to feel. Shock, anger, disbelief, all of it swirled inside him. Christy stood behind him, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face unreadable. Neither of them spoke, because for the first time since this all began, the situation had shifted beyond their control. Jason provided his contact details along with Karen's and Greg's information, ensuring the authorities had everything they needed. He also included Christy's details so she could be kept informed as well. Searching online, he found nothing yet. News of a crash like this would take time to surface. He and Christy moved to the living room, switching on the television, hoping for updates. Jason flipped through the channels, but none were reporting anything yet. As he stared at his phone, his mind replayed the whirlwind of events leading up to this moment. Then, finally, a news alert flashed across the screen. A flight bound for Honolulu had gone down in the Pacific. No further details were available. Christy gasped, covering her mouth in shock. Jason instinctively wrapped an arm around her, silently hoping Karen had somehow survived. As much as he despised what she had done, he never wished her dead. An hour later, his phone rang. He quickly muted the television and answered. The voice on the other end, calm but serious, confirmed the worst. Karen's flight had crashed. There were no additional details yet, but they promised to update him as soon as more information became available. He thanked them and hung up. Christy received the same call minutes later. They held each other, emotions raw, tears quietly slipping down their faces. Later, Jason's father called. That wasn't unusual. His parents always reached out whenever a major news event unfolded. "Hey, Jace!" his father's voice came through. "Hey, Dad, how are you?" "Just got back from church. Did you see the news about that plane crash?" "Yeah," Jason said, exhaling. "Terrible," his father murmured. "By the way, how's Karen? She should be back from Vegas soon, right?" Jason hesitated. "She's not doing well, Dad." A pause. "What do you mean?" "She was on that flight." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, "What the hell was she doing going to Hawaii without you?" "She was with her boyfriend," Jason admitted flatly. His father exhaled sharply. "Damn, son. I'm so sorry." A beat passed before he continued. "Listen, take the week off. I'll let Mike know at the office. You need to handle things, and if you need anything, just call." "Thanks, Dad," Jason said, ending the call. Conflicting emotions churned inside him. Sadness, yes, but also resentment. He hated what she had done to him, hated that she had lied so easily. But he wasn't grieving the way a husband normally would. There was no devastation, no deep loss. More than anything, he was frustrated by the mess she had left behind, her final expenses, the condo, everything that now fell on him. His gaze drifted to Christy. She had her own burdens to carry. How would she handle this? How would she move forward? A thought formed. "Christy," he said, voice steady, "why don't you sell your place and move in here?" She blinked, taken aback. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "You're about to go through a lot, and I know I am too. It would be easier if we had each other to lean on. I have a spare bedroom upstairs. You'd have your own space." Christy studied him for a long moment, then said, "I'll do it, but on one condition." "What's that?" She met his gaze. "I don't want to sleep alone." The directness of her words caught him off guard. He hesitated, not because he didn't want it, but because it was all happening so fast. "Are you sure?" he asked carefully. "I haven't felt close to anyone in years," she admitted. "Last night was the first time in a long time I felt safe. I don't mean just love, Jason. I just want to be close to someone again." He nodded. "Then stay as long as you need." A small, relieved smile crossed her face. "Good. I'll head home, grab my things, and be back tonight." After she left, Jason sat for a moment, letting it all sink in before picking up his phone again. He needed answers. Dialing a number, he waited until the line connected. "Hello?" came the familiar voice of Lucy, the woman who managed Karen's office. "Hey, Lucy, it's Jason." "Oh, hi, how's Hawaii?" she asked. His jaw tightened. "I wouldn't know. I hear it's nice this time of year, though." A pause. "Wait, what?" "Karen told you we were going to Hawaii together after the corporate event, didn't she?" "That's what she said." "Well, she wasn't with me. She was with Greg." A longer pause this time. "Oh my God," Lucy whispered. "She never made it," Jason continued. "Neither did he. Their plane went down earlier today." Lucy gasped. "Jason, I don't know what to say. That's awful." "I don't think there were any survivors," he said simply. "I'm so sorry," she said, sincerity in her voice. "If there's anything I can do." Jason sighed. "Actually, there is." "Does Karen have life insurance through the company?" "Yes," Lucy confirmed. "I'll start the paperwork first thing tomorrow. I'll need confirmation from the airline, though. Can you get me something official?" "I'll see what I can do," Jason said. Before he hung up, one last question nagged at him. "Lucy, did you know about Karen and Greg?" She hesitated. "There were rumors, but nothing concrete. We try not to gossip about things like that." "I see," Jason murmured. "Thanks for your help." That night, he and Christy sat on the couch, watching the evening news. The crash dominated the headlines. A freight ship crew, just miles from the impact site, had captured the final moments of the plane on video. The footage played. The aircraft, nose down, plummeting toward the ocean. The gut-wrenching sight of it hitting the water, the sheer force of the impact obliterating it on contact. Neither of them spoke. There was no question anymore. No lingering hope of a miraculous survival. It was over. The freighter crew altered course, hoping to locate survivors. They combed the crash site, pulling bodies from the wreckage-strewn water, but there was no one left alive. Among the floating debris, they recovered luggage, including belongings traced back to Karen and Greg. However, their bodies were never found. The months that followed were a whirlwind for Jason and Christy. She finalized the sale of her house and moved in with him, while he was left to sort out Karen's unfinished business, including her condo. Wanting nothing from it, he donated everything to Goodwill, who gladly accepted. Once emptied, he sold the property, managing to break even on what Karen had originally paid. Shortly after, both he and Christy received life insurance payouts of $500,000 each from Acme Real Estate. With her now living in his home, they wasted no time erasing all traces of Karen. Pictures were taken down, sentimental trinkets discarded, and even the furniture, especially the bed, was replaced. Jason's family picked through the remnants, taking anything they wanted, and the rest was either sold, burned, donated, or tossed. Handling Karen's finances turned into a bureaucratic nightmare, requiring months of endless paperwork. But once everything was settled, Jason walked away with roughly $250,000 from her bank accounts. Meanwhile, legal teams swarmed the victims' families, eager to capitalize on the tragedy. Further investigations revealed that pilot error was to blame. The crew misinterpreted a series of automated warnings and responded incorrectly. The aircraft spiraled downward at an alarming 12,000 feet per minute, slamming into the ocean at approximately 135 miles per hour. The entire descent lasted just over 3 minutes. Jason often found himself wondering what Karen must have been thinking in those final moments. A desperate call to him, a frantic attempt at an apology. It was clear she had grasped the reality of her fate. But regret at the very end didn't erase years of betrayal. Her final act had come too late. The airline ultimately reached a settlement, compensating each affected family with approximately $175,000 per passenger. When all was said and done, Jason and Christy collectively netted over $1.6 million. After taxes took their share, they were still left with a comfortable financial cushion. Since Karen and Greg's bodies were never recovered, there was no funeral, only memorial services. They held the gatherings mostly for the sake of their families, though neither Jason nor Christy felt any real grief. No tears were shed for the spouses who had deceived them. 3 months later, Christy left her old job and began working alongside Jason. By then, their relationship had transformed into something deep and undeniable. They had fallen completely in love. One evening, while sharing a meal at a Texas roadhouse, Jason took a deep breath, pushed back his chair, and dropped to one knee. The restaurant went silent as Christy gasped. Applause erupted around them as she let out a joyful squeal and threw her arms around his neck. "It's about time you made an honest woman out of me," she whispered teasingly. "Oh yeah?" he smirked. "And why's that?" She leaned in, her breath warm against his ear. "Because you're going to be a dad." A rush of emotion hit him all at once. He cupped her face, covering it with kisses, unable to contain his happiness. "I love you more than anything," he murmured. She smiled, eyes shining. "I love you more." Then, with a playful glint, she added, "Just promise me one thing." "Anything," he said without hesitation. "Never ask me to get on a plane." Jason laughed, pulling her close. "No arguments there," he assured her. The following years brought Jason and Christy more happiness than they could have imagined. Their pasts were dark and painful, but together, they built something new, something real. Jason continued to run his father's business, eventually taking over as CEO. With Christy by his side, they expanded the company, turning it into one of the most successful automotive enterprises in the state. Christy, once hesitant to trust again, found comfort in Jason's unwavering devotion. She eventually started her own real estate firm, learning from Karen's mistakes and ensuring that integrity remained at the core of her business. They both understood what it meant to be betrayed, and neither had any intention of repeating history. A year after their engagement, they married in a private ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. Unlike his first wedding, where Jason had felt the pressure of tradition, this one was different, simple, intimate, and filled with genuine joy. Christy was radiant, her hand resting on the small but growing curve of her belly, a reminder of the new life they were about to welcome. Their daughter, Emily, was born on a warm July morning, her bright blue eyes a perfect blend of both parents. Holding her in his arms for the first time, Jason realized something profound. Everything he had been through, every moment of pain and betrayal, had led him here. And he wouldn't change a thing. As Emily grew, she became the center of their world. She had Christy's smile and Jason's analytical mind, always asking questions and eager to learn. Watching her take her first steps, Jason felt a sense of peace he had never known before. He had spent years building a future with the wrong woman, only to find true happiness when he least expected it. The scars of the past never fully faded, but they no longer defined them. Jason and Christy would sometimes talk about Karen and Greg, not with anger, but with the distant curiosity of people who had moved on. They had no graves to visit, no final goodbyes to say. The plane crash had closed that chapter for them, in ways they never could have predicted. Years later, Jason sat on the porch of their home, watching Emily chase fireflies in the fading twilight. Christy joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. He turned to kiss her forehead, the simple gesture still making her smile. "You ever think about what would have happened if things had gone differently?" she asked softly. Jason took a deep breath, considering. "I used to," he admitted. "But not anymore," Christy nodded, intertwining her fingers with his. "Me neither." As the stars began to appear, Jason felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. Life had a strange way of working things out. What once felt like the end had merely been a redirection, a painful, necessary journey to something far better. He looked at Christy, at Emily, at the life they had built together, and for the first time in a long time, he was exactly where he was meant to be.